But we'll start now. It's 9:06. I welcome everyone to the virtual side event titled Social Policies to Accelerate Implementation of the 2030 Agenda, Promoting Civic Engagement and Community Participation. This side event will discuss how social policies could be made more effective and help to create a fairer, more equitable, inclusive, and humane society where the needs and aspirations of individuals are at the forefront of the drive to implement the 2030 Agenda. The roles of civic engagement and community participation will be emphasized, along with the importance of policy coherence. We are very grateful. We have a team of experts, of panelists with us today, as well as a respondent. I'll just list who they are, and as they will be making their remarks, I will provide a briefer biography and sketch so we can get a flavor of the experiences and the competencies of our speakers. Our speakers are Professor Lynn M. Healy, who is the main representative to the UN and for the International Association of Schools of Social Work. Mr. Christopher Dapar is Coordinating Director at Resource Link Foundation in Ghana. Dr. Suresh Patare is a professor and director at the Center for Studies in Rural Development, the Institute of Social Work and Research at Ahmednagar, Maharashtra, India. Dr. Peta Ann Baker is a social development specialist, an independent scholar. I think she's also a public intellectual and joint editor of the Caribbean Journal of Social Work. Dr. Sergei Zelenev is our special representative of the International Council on Social Welfare to the UN, and we thank him for organizing this important event today. Mrs. Patricia Martin O'Mealy is the president of ICSW North America and the Caribbean region, and she will be our respondent. I'm Kudo Snell. I will be moderating or chairing. I'm professor at the School of Social Work at Howard University in Washington, D.C. This event is organized by the International Council on Social Welfare and the International Association of Schools of Social Work. I will now provide a brief bio of Professor Lynn Healy, who is our first speaker. Professor Lynn Healy is a professor emerita from the University of Connecticut School of Social Work. She is currently the main representative to the UN for the International Association of Schools of Social Work. She has published books and articles on human rights, international social work, and human service management, as well as several recent articles about the Sustainable Development Goals. I give you Professor Lynn Healy.
Good morning, everybody. I apologize if you can tell I'm speaking from a phone. It's a little bit inelegant sitting in a hotel room on a phone, but anyway, good morning. It's great that this technology brings us together and opens new avenues for our main topic, which is participation. We're gathered to look at the intersection between participation and social policy. And I'm aware, and hopefully many of you are too, that this event, this 62nd session of the Commission for Social Development, follows what was held in the fall of an SDG summit by the UN General Assembly. And that was a very sobering meeting because it made us even more aware that social policies to address the Sustainable Development Goals are falling disastrously short. The Midway reports on progress toward 2030 were very discouraging and showed that the majority of goals are either stagnant or even regressing. The failures to reduce inequality, Goal 10, are particularly stark. So the challenge now is to be recharged toward 2030. Can participation and participatory approaches make a difference? My premise is that policies can only be truly effective by involving those who will be affected by the policy. Where there's no consultation with intended target groups, policies are likely to miss the target and be ineffective or only partially effective at best. And I think we could generate numerous examples locally and globally about that point. I also want to point out that in addition to we focus on those 17 goals when we talk about 2030, but these goals are part of a broader agenda. And if you've never read the whole document, I advise you to do so because it captures a lot of the important elements that are left out of the SDGs. But one important part of this agenda is the pledge to leave no one behind, and an additional promise to reach those, to address those farthest behind as a priority. But how can this be fulfilled? Who are those left behind? What are their experiences? What would their priorities be for the SDGs? How can participatory approaches address these questions? And I guess we need to ask, who can answer these questions? Can governments, can UN officials answer these questions? Do they know who is being left behind and how to find them? I've been part for the last, I don't know, probably at least the last decade of a small committee, the Grassroots Task Force, which is part of the NGO Committee for Social Development, the NGO body that relates to this commission. And as a group, we've made a series of efforts over the past decade to try to reach those at the local level, including highly vulnerable groups. And this is not an easy task. There are a lot of challenges in identifying and reaching those who are likely to be left behind, people that are often largely invisible, especially to higher levels of government and to the UN. This task force, through very rudimentary, I hesitate to call them research efforts, but we do try to get as close as possible to people at the grassroots to seek their opinions and their experiences. And we've looked at such things as poverty, social inclusion, inequalities, homelessness, the SDGs, and more. We seek out feedback from grassroots groups and then work to feed these reactions, these experiences into the commission through reports and side events. Whenever possible, we use the words of the respondents directly in our reports and in our side events. These are small efforts, and a lot more is needed to build partnerships. If you look at the schedule for this meeting, next Tuesday morning, the Grassroots Task Force will have another side event. It's actually listed under my NGO, the International Association of Schools of Social Work, where we're going to report on our efforts to get feedback on what people would like to have said to the SDG Summit if they had been attending. Participation by excluded groups, however, as I've said, is not easily achieved. And furthermore, participation to be meaningful in social policy must be genuine. It must be real. Many times participatory efforts are more like window dressing, and they really don't address, they don't really reach and intend to use feedback received. As I was preparing for these few remarks, I remembered an article that I had used many years ago. It was actually written more than 50 years ago by Sherry Arnstein, and it was called The Ladder of Citizen Participation, where she discussed 8 rungs on a ladder from what she called levels of participation, which are basically manipulative type events to make government officials or policymakers look good, but without any real intent to use feedback, up to the 8th highest level of citizen control. It's very unlikely, of course, that we'll reach citizen control as we talk about UN and global policy. But it is important to remember that to be meaningful, participation to be genuine. And one of the middle rungs on Sherry Arnstein's ladder is consulting. And consulting, to be genuine, means that you have to intend, you have to listen, and you have to actually intend to use some of the input, the feedback that is being received even if it conflicts with your preconceived notions of how policy ought to be formulated. So I think as we think of participation, we need to think about this idea of being genuine and intentional in terms of using feedback. I'll just close with a few words from the International Association of Schools of Social Work submitted a written statement to this issue of the this meeting of the commission. And we emphasize some of the notions about partnership. And this was written in November, so I didn't know I was going to be serving on this panel. But we said these promises, meaning the promises of the SDGs, cannot be met without partnerships between governments and civil society organizations, especially those active at the grassroots level. Participatory approaches should be used in designing policies and programs to address inequality, engaging the most vulnerable in decisions that affect their lives. We called on governments, the UN, and civil society organizations to work in collaboration to elevate the voices of those who've been historically marginalized, and a commitment to participation in policy design by those affected. More partnerships between governments and civil society organizations, including those active at the grassroots level, to identify and engage the most vulnerable and most likely to be left behind. So that's just a few introductory comments, which I hope will be a bit as we proceed with the panel today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Healy. You have done it under 10 minutes and you've given us a lot of good content. So I hope others will follow your model so we can give an opportunity for everyone to share their comments. Is Christopher on? Is Christopher up and running now? Christopher? If not, we will move to Dr. Suresh Patare. Dr. Suresh Patare is presently working as director and professor at the Institute for Social Work and Research, the Center for Studies in Rural Development at Ahmednagar in India. He served as associate professor at the Department of Social Work at Delhi University and the Tata Institute for Social Sciences in Mumbai. He conducted research projects on community participation, sustainable development, spiritually sensitive social work, and published papers on these themes. He is a founder member of the National Association of Professional Social Work in India and served as its secretary for 8 years. He is presently the joint secretary of the India Network of Professional Social Workers Associations. Dr. Suresh Patare, thank you.
Thank you, Kodar, and thank you all the co-panelists and all the participants for being here. I appreciate and thank IASSW and ICSW for organizing this event and providing this opportunity to share some of my thoughts on promotion of civic engagement and community participation. As introduced, I live in India, and my work experience also largely in India, and I'm social work educator, practitioner, and also doing research on this. While discussing on this theme, I would like to share some of my thoughts from Indian perspective, and also that while doing this, I will use this spiritually sensitive social work approach, that while doing this, while promoting the civic engagement and community participation, what Indian culture or the cultural context that help us in promoting this. I will also present some of the themes, that cultural themes that making the this community participation happen. How the cultural context or the spiritually sensitive social work that can be helpful for us while formulating policies and also like enhancing this community participation. So I will be talking about 5 different themes. One of the theme or one of the concept that in Indian culture that you might have heard about is the Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. Now, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam is the concept which talks about the world is one family. And this concept is very helpful for us taking forward the uh, social policies that why and how we should be promoting the community participation, especially in the social policies. This concept in Indian culture that provides essential guidelines, like it is the Sanskrit phrase of 3 words, Vasudha, Eva, and Kutumbakam. Vasudha means the earth, Eva means emphasizing, and Kutumbakam means a family. The cardinal message of this theme or the concept is that peaceful coexistence is the only way to happiness. Harmonious coexistence with nature and with other human beings. Now, this actually teaches the universal values of love and peace towards the universal family. It affirms the worth of all life, human, animal, and plants, and the value of their interconnectedness on Earth and in the universe. At the application level, I advocate that when we form the policies, this provides us the value base that if we have to get the community participation and the civic engagement, we have to make it value based so that people feel that it is for them. It is not the token participation, but in the true sense, when it is culturally competent policies, that will really help people to see that they are for them and they are part of it. Indian culture, the beautiful amalgamation of diverse languages, traditions, and religions. Another theme actually that I would just talk about here. Now, when I talk these themes, these are not religious. These are not ethnic, racial, or sectarian per se. It is not of particular group. It is culture. Culture is for the community. And this cultural concept, if we take into consideration while formulating policies or while implementing policies, then it becomes the community policies and people get more engaged and involved in formulating and implementing them. The concept, another concept that I would like to bring here is the Loka Samastu Sukhina Bhavantu. This is again the communal prayer. When I say communal prayer, it is community prayer in Indian culture. It means that may everyone be happy in the whole world. Another popular translation of this prayer is that may all beings everywhere be free and happy. Now, this prayer can be sung usually at every community gathering or the participatory rituals that happens in the community. Why I'm saying this is that this prayer really makes people like inclusive and people bringing together when we pray for everybody beyond the culture, beyond religion, and beyond all the cultural differences. Another concept, third one that I would like to bring here is the Tattvam Asi. Tattvam Asi basically is thou art that. In Indian culture, this is very helpful in self-realization. It refers to the unity of individuals, self or soul, with the ultimate universal consciousness or the absolute. This concept provides the basis for accepting that every part of this universe is the ultimate reflection of us. Now, this is connecting self with others. This is also connecting that the essence of Tattva Atam Asi. This is actually guides practitioners or the policymakers towards the realization that all beings are one with ultimate. Understanding this is believed to be the ultimate form of compassion in which individuals recognize one another as part of the same food. Now, the fourth cultural concept that I suggest that this also becomes very guiding value for policy formulation and implementation, uh, and getting the promoting the community participation as a part of Indian cultural practices and spirituality. Now, I'm not talking about any religious, I'm talking about the spirituality that brings people together and pray for each other's welfare. So this is the one such mantra is Sarva Bhavantu Sukhano Sarva Santu Niramaya. It literal meaning is that everyone be happy, healthy, and prosperous. In this prayer, one should wish that everyone, be they people, birds, animals, and all other living beings, be healthy and happy. And if someone is unhappy or sick, it is the duty of others to help the person in need. This also emphasizes the unity of minds to create healthy and robust civic society, civic organization for the prosperity and happiness of all, and to promote solidarity and righteousness. And lastly, the another concept that we have in this culture is Bahujan Hitai, Bahujan Sukhai. It is actually when we formulate the policy, it is talks about the policies for the welfare and happiness of masses. It is for the happiness of the and the welfare of the masses. Is the traditional teaching of Indian culture, and according to this principle of this mandate, it is the social responsibility of the state and the citizens to work for the people's welfare, thereby making the masses happy and content. And according to this doctrine, the ultimate objective of life is happiness. However, it is unethical to make oneself please to expense of others. This is the concept. This concept does not allow conflicts among the various classes. Instead, it promotes to work for the good of the entire human race, especially the oppressed. And according to the teachings of Gautam Buddha, uh, it is in 5th century BC, he taught that Bahujan Hitai, Bahujan Sukhai, that we should work for the welfare and happiness of masses. Now, when I said this concept, I would like to conclude by saying that our policies, if not based on the values, if policies are not competent to culturally competent, then community will not own it. Secondly, it will not be for the community to get involved and engaged. These are a few things that I thought I would share in view of these thoughts. So thank you very much. I think I will overpass a little bit time. So thank you very much. I conclude here. You are
You're
muted.
muted.
I wanted to thank Dr. Patare. No, he's right in time. So we're doing good. And if Mr. Christopher's not on, our other speakers may have a few extra minutes at this point because Christopher's not able to join us just yet. So thank you so much. Our next speaker will be Dr. Peter Ann Baker. She has over 40 years combined experience as a developmental practitioner, professional social worker, university academic, and public intellectual. Dr. Baker worked for over 20 years in the development, NGO, and civil society sectors. She subsequently joined the University of the West Indies, or UWI as we fondly call it, where she taught a variety of courses, including community organizing, advocacy practice, research methods, and professional ethics. Dr. Baker retired from UWI in 2017 at the rank of senior lecturer. She remains active in the social policy arena and currently serves as the chair of the editorial board and joint editor of the Caribbean Journal of Social Work. Dr. Baker.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, afternoon, evening, and night, because I know we're all in different time zones. I want to thank the IA and Lynn Healy especially for inviting me to contribute to this panel. And actually, as I prepared my thoughts and what I wanted to say, I realized that I actually was at Copenhagen. I don't think many of us knew what we were taking part in at that time. But I can still, the recall makes me think about the strategies that were used to get civil society there, to get representation for the unrepresented. There were many meetings held on the August carpets of the conference center in Copenhagen. And I think one of our challenges is that we are looking back. Next year is the 30th anniversary of that first conference on social development. And a World Summit is planned for 2025. So this year's meeting of the Commission on Social Development is occurring at a time when preparations are far advanced. And in fact, I suspect the first draft of the declaration of the World Summit next year has already been prepared. Because this is the nature of intergovernmental organization operations. So part of my challenge, I felt, was to think about in the context of an intergovernmental organization, which is large, which is lumbering, and which, if we are honest, is currently under threat and in fact under attack. What can we say about social development, about social policy, and about continuing to work towards achieving what were initially the 10 commitments arrived at in Copenhagen, which first of all talked about creating an environment, economic, political, social, etc., environment that will enable people to achieve social development, to eradicate absolute poverty, to promote social integration and equality, and so on. And those commitments then transitioned. We had the Millennium Development Goals, which didn't seem to survive very long, but I think because we were crossing that big border, that big marker point, we thought I think the world felt we should do something for 2000, because the MDGs quickly got subsumed into what we now talk about and focus on, which are the Sustainable Development Goals. And those processes, and in fact, as I prepared, I said, we established the Sustainable Development Goals in 2016, and we were setting goals for achievement by 2030. And I said to myself, but was that realistic? Was that reasonable? I know we get caught up in the momentum of conferences and meetings, but as Lynn has mentioned, there are lots of concerns. The world is in a very perilous shape. I think there is a general agreement that the MDGs will not be achieved in most countries in the world, not even the majority of them. And in fact, some are going backwards, and that's not just because of the pandemic, but also because of the change in the political scenario, which has existed in the last few years, and in a sense has almost accompanied, when I think about the timelines, I think about the rise of conservatism, of neoliberalism, and so on, that was rising at the time that we were affirming goals for social development. Because the neoliberal agenda began to be written in the 1980s. It made itself clear and plain in the 1980s, and it has gained momentum. And so I wonder if perhaps one of the things we bring to social policy discussions is a certain amount of naivete. I think, yes, we talk about the importance of the legislators and the policymakers, but I think we are not frank enough with ourselves at the amount of power that is wielded and about the power that that other forces have. I'm particularly concerned that in relation to the SDGs, whereas the environmental goals have been accompanied by regular global engagements, I'm not aware of a similar kind of momentum. I know that the CSD meets and that those are occasions for major discussions and inputs, but the kind of gathering, as it was put, of persons at the political level to reflect on, to understand. And so I'm hoping that one of the things will be that the Commission really makes a strong effort to have our heads of government and not just appearing to deliver a prepared 3 minutes statement, but to get our heads of government, our leading decision makers and persons from the financial sphere, from the private sector, present in the room when our discussions are taking place. It can be contentious. We see that from COP26, where, when you bring all of those forces together, it can be quite an explosive gathering. But I think at least people are engaged face to face with each other. And people, I think those of us who are trying to promote the goals of justice and equity will in fact be confronted by the reality of what is occurring in the world, in our individual countries. And I wanted to take, therefore, a quick look. One of the focus of this panel and so on is about participation. And I think one of the things we can see in the last 25 years is the way in which ideas about participation have been co-opted by conservative forces, by neoliberal forces. And so we should not fool ourselves in thinking that, social workers, activists, social work academics and others have the handle on what participation is and how we should go about it. If I take an example, in my own country, in Jamaica, we're currently engaged in the process of constitutional reform. And one of the instruments that has been heavily co-opted is the instrument of the town hall meeting. And so town hall meetings, quote unquote, have become the primary mechanism through which people's views are solicited about what kind of constitution do we want. And when you ask the questions about how representative is a town hall meeting, who is taking notes of the town hall meeting, what is the commitment of the commission that is reviewing the Constitution, what commitment have they made to pay attention to the reports, who is doing the analysis to look at what the common themes are, and so on, you are not treated very kindly. Those questions are not welcome. So I think we also have to be careful, not only to bear in mind Arnstein's ladder, which tends to be very linear and think you go from one to the other. But we also need to look at the ways in which we have a brand of populist conservatism, which is in fact co-opting many of these ideas and many of these tools. And we have to therefore be able to distinguish, in fact, when in fact. So it may not be the absence of consultation, for example, but it may be the misuse of consultative mechanisms. I wanted to say one last thing and make a recommendation. And it follows on from talking about the issue of participation. And we talk a lot about vulnerable groups. And in that category, we include older persons. And there are those who will disagree with me, but I think that most of our organizations, including the United Nations itself, has really been derelict in advancing its understanding of aging. So, for example, even bodies like the ILO, even the Department of Economic and Social Affairs, for example, continue to use language like elderly, when 30 years ago, ECOSOC said, elderly is a stigmatizing term which contributes to exclusion rather than inclusion, and we need to replace that kind of language with the language of older persons. Again, when we look at the economic agencies, we are still only studying, and when we talk about labor force and productivity, economic productivity and so on, we're still only studying persons up to age 60. With while at the same time, we are panicking that maybe 1/3 of the world's population is in receipt of any kind of social assistance or social security. But part of the problem is that perhaps our calculations are inadequate, because certainly one of the things the science has shown us is that people are living far, far, far longer. And so when you get to age 60 or 65, when in many countries you are forced into involuntary retirement, the assumption is that you're going home to do your knitting or to tinker in your garage. And that is very far from the reality of the majority of older people who continue to have to derive livelihoods for themselves. And that's not just because of the inadequacies of our social systems, but also because it is part of their own self-actualization and self-realization. So I saw an article recently, I apologize for not recalling the author, who talked about the concept of vulnerability as problematic, because it goes against the other trajectory of human rights and social rights. Because when you talk about vulnerable groups, the people who use that language to describe other people immediately put themselves in positions of authority and place the vulnerable in positions of less power and needing to be cared for, looked after, protected, rather than constructed as being active participants in their own lives and in the national and global social processes. So, as
we're running tight, Dr. Baker. We're running tight.
Right, I'm wrapping up. I'm at my recommendation. So,
okay.
As I try to think about these things, because there's so many things coming at us in this arena, I thought to myself that perhaps one of the basic thing that this 60-second meeting of the commission could do could be to do an analysis of the areas of connection and disconnection within and between United Nations agencies themselves, to begin to unpack perhaps the ways in which they have not interrogated the language they've been using and how that has then been manifested in their policy prescriptions. And I would like to see the Commission then shape the coming World Summit agenda to look at and to focus on not the long list, but 3 or 4 critical actions. Small island developing states are facing existential threats and so on. But those actions must focus on strengthening political will, promoting greater collaboration, and enlarging the voices of populations that are persistently described as marginalized, vulnerable, and excluded. I think if we can work at those 3, I think we will, in fact, then be able to renew hope and move away from the despair and the cynicism that is beginning to permeate the field. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you so much for your provocative proclamation, Dr. Baker, and for making us think about the elderly. I'm in that group, so I'm with you. We don't want to be disenfranchised. Let me check, Christopher. I understand from Yunji that Christopher is online. Can you hear us, Christopher? If you can, please respond because you are next. If not, we will move on.
Yeah, Prof, I'm here.
Okay, great. I'm going to introduce you briefly, Christopher. Mr. Christopher Dapar serves as the country director of Resource Link Foundation in Ghana, as a human rights advocate, civil society and governance practitioner, and policy reforms catalyst at local and international levels. He's the regional president of the International Council on Social Welfare for Western and Central Africa. In 2023, Mr. Dapar received the prestigious Dr. Nina L. Meyer of a Global Leadership Award as a leader with exceptional potential and commitment to positive change, which was here in the United States. He also serves as the National Vice President of the Ghana NGO Coalition on the Rights of the Child. Thank you, Christopher. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Prof. Chair. Thank you, colleague panelists. I'm happy to be with you this morning to share my thoughts on social policies and how they accelerate implementation on the Agenda 2020. I don't think I need to belay any delay because I was caught up with the internet fatality. Social policy has a history over the years, looking at creation. God has made us to understand that we are each other's keeper. So social policy, as we understand, came to be in existence for society. And society is made out of the individuals. So bringing issues together to live harmoniously is a way of letting social policy take its track. We have different levels of policies, even though there are some commonalities as far as countries are concerned. But cultural dynamics can cause some policies to differ from one country to the other. When you come to the balance of some of the African countries, you realize that social policies are basically hinging on the policies that affect the well-being, rights, and opportunities of people in society. It covered areas like education, health, social protection, employment, housing, migration, and all varieties of human rights issues. And you can attest to the fact that there's no simple answer to how social policies could be made more effective. As different contexts and challenges may require different approaches. However, there are some possible ways to improve social policies. But then, I just want to give you some brief background as where we are coming from. You understand that social policy plays a critical role in shaping the society, the economic balance, and political infrastructure that has impact on individuals, families, and the community. And for that matter, well-designed and properly implemented social policies have the abilities to promote civic engagement, social cohesion, as my colleagues have also alluded to, and community participation. We always say that development is meant for people, and for that matter, if people are to benefit from the development, they have to be participants. Development is meant for people, and if people stand in for the development, they have to be participants to whatever entails for the development to happen. Only with meaningful participation of intended target groups that policies are likely to be effective. If people do not participate, a policy in the society will never survive. So it is very critical that empowering individuals to participate in decision-making process that affect their life could be seen as a central tenet of human-centered development and essential to meeting the sustainable development goals, which we use to measure our success in terms of development. You also realize that comprehensive social policies are critical tools for government to address social injustices and foster solidarity. And going further, you see that universal social protection schemes are closely linked to integrate social policies proof to their social values in many countries. It's also realized that promoting community engagement and participation through comprehensive and effective social policies require strategic and inclusive approach. Policy advocacy, which can be community-led policy advocacy, it can be central government-led policy advocacy, is to promote social policies aligned with the sustainable development goals, which we already see and continuously work with community to advocate for changes in laws, norms, or regulations that impact on the well-being of the people for which the policies are set. So making the policy making process very inclusive depends on a number of factors, such as raising awareness and the various factors of civic engagement, accessible to information, be it from the traditional setting, from group setting, from any association setting, then to the governmental level. Quality feedback as to if we have people to represent us as a particular engagement, how do we get their feedback? The feedback loop, is it working? Taking the information from the people to the council level, to the forum as well decisions are made. These are some of the things that we need to factor when it comes to legal framework that mandate and support policy, public participation and decision-making processes. We also see that to make policy coherent is one of the critical factors in this regard, ensuring alignment among different policy domains, such as education, health, housing, and employment to address the multifaceted needs of the communities. You see that all these social issues are interrelated. So we should not leave one and then move with the other. We need to move with all of them and then With that coherency, it helps to avoid conflicts or intended policy consequences. The interconnected nature of various social issues also should be recognized at the inception of social policy packages. The alignment with economic and environmental issues policy domain is vital when we aim at creating a holistic and sustainable approach beneficial for society at large. Today, digital world has come to stay. And whether we like it or not, we cannot work without it. So the inclusion of digital, bringing people together through the digital literacy, using the technology that we are all struggling with now, they are all prerequisites for capacity development and more successful social policies. It may be very critical that social policy can impact on assessment to evaluate the potential effect of policies and that we initiate on communities. In other words, it may facilitate social impact assessment when we are able to evaluate the potential effects of the policies and the initiatives on the community. Among other things, it may promote collaboration with professionals from diverse fields of addressing interconnected social and environmental issues. Digital inclusion is very critical, as alluded earlier, to facilitate community involvement in assessing process to ensure societal perceptions are well much considered. The proposed side event, which is what we are looking at now, is critically looking at the effective way of helping to create fairer and more equitable, inclusive, and inhuman society where the needs and aspirations of individuals are the forefront of to drive and also to implement the 2020 agenda. In that regard, I also like to take the opportunity to come up with some suggestions as to how to address the challenges to ensure that there will be efficiency and effectiveness in the social policy issues. One, we need to involve the people who are affected by the policies in the design and implementation for proper evaluation of the policy going forward. This can help us to ensure that the policies are responsive to the needs, preferences, and value for the people, that they are accountable and of transparency in nature. If the people for whom the policies are designed are not part of the decision-making process, their needs and aspirations will not be met, and it will be a policy in the vacuum. We also see that there's the need for us to promote social justice and human rights as a guiding principles. We should not see a social policy as something that politicians will give away social protection package as something that we are begging from. But we should see it as a human rights agenda for which if there's any government or any facilitator, government facilitator or policy making organization or individual should see it as a human rights issue and therefore need to be given to the people for whom the person is serving, especially the policymakers.
Thank you, Chris. You have about a minute left, Chris.
Thank you. We also have the need to let investment take its course in terms of infrastructure. Because as we are talking about digital age, if we don't put in place the needed infrastructure that will allow people to use the digital world, then our policies will be there as rhetoric. But we are talking about the practical policies that we need to do to ensure that people get the benefit for which the policies are put in there. As we also mentioned earlier on, policies foster social cohesion and solidarity among different groups. And society as a goal, that can help to build trust. Because if the policies are there, it helps them to have the cooperation, the mutual support for each other. And that will also prevent or resolve conflict and violence. Social policies can foster social cohesion by promoting dialogue, participation, and inclusion, and in diversity. And to end by not on the list, we also see that social policies can help us to be very, very effective by adapting to the challenging needs and challenging issues of the society, such as demographic transitions, environmental issues, technological innovation, and global issues. Social policies should be very flexible and innovative and be able to respond to emerging and evolving situations. There should be also be consideration on coordination and integrated approach that will allow policies such as economic, environment, and foreign policies to ensure that there is a synergy in development. Thank you.
Thank you, Christopher. Thank you so much. Thank you. You've given us a lot of information to think about. Our next speaker is Dr. Sergei Zelenev. Dr. Zelenev is the Special Representative of the International Council on Social Welfare to the United Nations in New York. From 2012 to 2019, he served as the Executive Director of ICSW. Prior to assuming his position at ICSW, Dr. Zelenev worked for the United Nations for almost 3 decades, both at their headquarters in New York and in the field in Africa twice and in the Caribbean. His international career with the UN Secretariat involved a range of assignments with progressively widening responsibilities in the analytical and intergovernmental policy fields. He coordinated preparation and contributed chapters to numerous United Nations analytical studies and reports. He has written widely on social protection, aging, youth, and intergenerational relationships, publishing chapters in the edited books and articles in the peer-reviewed journals. As visiting professor, he taught courses at Cornell University and New York University in the US and lectured extensively on socioeconomic development and social policy issues in other universities in the US and beyond. Dr. Zelenev participated in many international events, symposia, and conferences, making keynote presentations on issues of international significance. Most recently, he contributed chapters and co-edited the volume Digital Transformation and Social Well-Being, Promoting an Inclusive Society, published by Routledge 2023. Dr. Zelenev.
Thank you very much, Kudor. Thank you for this introduction. And outright, I would like to thank all my colleagues for their wonderful statements and for many very important issues which they brought to the discussion. You know, the issues are too numerous to discuss now. I hope that we will have a chance at the end a little bit to contemplate on that. But at this point, I would like to talk about social policies at the macro level. First of all, because it used to be my profession for many years, and working on the intergovernmental bodies who are creating social policies. Secondly, I'm most grateful to Professor Peter Ann Baker, who brought Copenhagen Summit to the forefront and commitments of the Copenhagen Summit, because they were very, very important. And we are now sometimes are calling member states to come back to Copenhagen, because on many occasions these commitments were not fully realized. Today, I would like to take only very few issues to discuss, which I consider quite important. Those are the issues which has economic dimension. You know, quite often on the political level, social issues and social practitioners suffer the drawback of being sidelined, because quite often the decisions are made by economic bodies, including international organizations, which disregard the social dimensions. Well, we have to say that integration of economic and social policies has advanced since the Copenhagen summit. At the Copenhagen summit, actually, this drawback of ignoring social aspects were highlighted. But now, what I would like to say that it is important to recognize that social programs should be both socially just and economically viable. I do not understand why my computer gives me some kind of good morning.
We can hear you. There's no interruption.
There is no interruption. Excellent.
No.
So I would like to say that the effective social programs should be both socially just and economically viable. And I would like to start with underscoring that social issues often become political issues because they involve matters that affect society as a whole and require government or public policy decisions to address. We all recognize that social issues quite often revolve around deeply held values and beliefs within society. Well, one example is social protection. I mean, all countries decide for themselves whom they want to protect in the first place. Mothers with children, or maybe older persons, or maybe they should provide universal social protection. This is a reflection of deeply rooted values and moral and ethical perspectives that exist in societies. But why it is important to the economic aspect is that many social issues revolve around the allocation of resources and government funding. So these decisions cannot but be political. And I would like to emphasize the linkage between the policies as established at the national level and the policies that exist at the community level. So welfare programs, healthcare funding, or education spending are inherently political issues which involve choices, and trade-offs here are inevitable in decisions how to distribute limited resources. So the first issue is how to make community engagement inclusive in a sense that it can impact the debate on the distribution of limited resources. So in this light, some social consensus regarding budget priorities is a prerequisite for coherent actions and is highly desirable. We now clearly see the importance of reforms to overcome economic crisis in the aftermath of COVID-19 pandemic. And benefits provided under the existing targeted cash transfers programs in many countries were very helpful, and they significantly reduced poverty and inequality. Now we have to realize that the potential for physical pressures and physical constraints is growing. First of all, we see relatively high interest rates payments, and the pace at which low-income countries need to repay debts are straining their budgets. We have to admit this. This prevents low-income countries from spending more on essential services or the critical investment needed to attract business, create jobs, or build climate resilience nationally or at the local level. So we all recognize that our warming planet imperils environment, but also it imperils food security, homes, and health. And the financial side is mind-boggling. For example, according to the recently released data by the IMF, only in Asia, meeting mitigation and adaptation needs of developing countries requires enormous investment of over $1 trillion annually. And similar numbers probably might exist in Europe and Africa. So I would like to stress that when we are discussing social policy formulation, inception of social policy, there are several important issues which need to be taken into account, and apart from financial dimensions. First of all, collaboration and coordination between different agencies is crucial because a lot of policies are intersectoral. And social protection schemes, again, is a very good example because it covers healthcare, welfare issues, child welfare, issues of aging, all this. Another dimension here is long-term vision and commitment, because we all emphasize importance of sustainability of policy efforts. If any new administration is not going to make commitments to the previous administration, or even worse, reverse previous commitments of policies, it may be quite detrimental for overall goals of, and I would like to say that the key goal is improving welfare and the quality of life for individuals, communities, and societies. So in this sense, inclusion is the key word in many ways when we are discussing the background to overall social policies and community engagement. Second group of issues which I would like to underscore concerns community engagement, and the goal here is how to address the needs and even the aspirations of communities through social policies. So in this case, several recommendations based on the international experience may be brought for the discussion, how these needs are properly considered. First of all, building awareness linked to implementing educational programs to raise awareness about social issues. And, as I mentioned earlier, importance of inclusivity. So in this sense, it's important to foster the culture of empathy and understanding. Commitment to sustained efforts linked to a longer-term vision. This is maybe the answer. We all know that both social services and welfare reforms benefit from public engagement and awareness. It is important to communicate the goals and benefits of those initiatives to build public support and ensure that citizens are aware of available services. We can say that we should not disregard the community, the capacity building, because we make sure that capacity to implement challenges exist on the ground. That brings the issues of empowerment and also skill building. And I think that all of the previous speakers, one way or another, mentioned this. And also what was mentioned, and what I completely agree, is the issue of policy coherence, because it is linked to coordination between different social policies and different social programs. And effective collaboration ensures that resources, which are limited always, are utilized efficiently, and policies are coherent, resulting in a more holistic approach to addressing social challenges. I think that we need to underscore that the quest for better social services and better community engagement involves establishing feedback mechanisms to understand the impact of policies on individuals and communities. So-called feedback loop is critical for adapting and justifying welfare reforms and to assess the evolving needs of communities. So all these issues are vitally important at the community level, and there are linkages between these issues and the overall social policy as conceived nationally. And the third group of issues I would like to mention goes a little bit beyond the scope of our discussion, but I think that they are important. I would like to mention a little bit the issue of social policy innovations. Social policy innovations in early 21st century have aimed to address emerging challenges and promote social welfare and justice. You know, some of these notable innovations were conditional cash transfers, which became a very important part of social protection policies in many, many countries. Also, I would mention here a contentious but potentially important issue of universal basic income, which sounds a little bit utopian maybe sometimes, but maybe not sound as utopian in the longer run. Providing all citizens with a regular unconditional sum of money regardless of their employment status. Because this policy clearly aims to reduce poverty, provide financial security, and address economic inequalities. It is interesting that some pilot programs which were done in India, they produced a very positive effect on marginalized communities. But in Finland, this experiment was not as successful and brought a more complex picture. Another social policy innovation which may have impact for the community improvement and community engagement is social impact bonds. It is a financing mechanism. At this point, mostly it is in developed countries where private investors find social programs and government repays them based on the success of these programs in achieving some predetermined outcomes. So this is an attempt to bring private capital into the picture. Clearly, to the area of social policy innovations, we should also mention digital inclusion programs.
We have
And
about a
even-
minute, Sergey. About a minute.
Yes, thank you. So digital, it's another important issue, recognizing the importance of digital access in the modern world. And some social policies focus on ensuring digital inclusion for marginalized communities. So, we could also mention here a very interesting initiative as a holistic well-being index or alternative well-being indices that gained attention in various countries as a means to measure and guide social policies beyond traditional economic indicators. So all this shows that there is a wide international quest for new approaches, but it does not negate in any way commitments of the Copenhagen Summit. And this is so important to have this new social summit announced by the Secretary General of the United Nations, Guterres, in 2025, because now the situation became very complex, and this complexity by itself requires many new vision and many new approaches. And thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Sergey. I know we're running a little over time, but we started late, so we will give at least 5 to 10 minutes for our respondent, and then we will end our webinar. We've had a productive meeting today. We've learned a lot, and in the chat, there have been a lot of positive feedback directed at the group as well as to me, which I will share with you later. Mrs. Patricia Martin O'Mealy is the chair of the ICSW US Committee and president of the North American and Caribbean region. She is an NASW pioneer and member of the Pioneer Steering and Program Committees. She serves as the executive director of Life Studies Institute for Mental Health Training and Program Development, and formerly she was the Director of Staff Development and Training for the District of Columbia Department of Mental Health, Community Services Administration, and for 24 years she was a fellow adjunct associate professor with me at Howard University School of Social Work. President Martin O'Mealy. You are muted, Professor.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. I was very happy to be here and to hear all of the excellent presentations this morning. At heart, I am a grassroots person. Much of my clinical work has been with the grassroots community. And I was kind of put aback when a young volunteer working with us at ICSW at a conference said to me, "Well, what do you do?" And I was very shocked. I thought, sure, she would understand what it was that we do. But I recognized that we were not providing concrete programs that she could just check off and understand. And we continue to struggle with her question, what do you do? We wanted to be able to give an answer that accurately defined our work in addressing social development goals, for us to understand what we, ICSW US, is doing towards developing initiatives that reflect community engagement. And that is the real answer. How are we operating in a way that allows those reflections to manifest in social development? In the paper, we see a strategic and inclusive approach to community engagement. To that end, policies must be able to stimulate movement and activity that not just informs the community about the problem or goals to be reached, but also to design a strategic and inclusive approach that moves the community to action, and that they would be able to be focused and an energetic body that understands the bigger picture to be achieved and not just their own specific goals. I'm very much appreciative of the feedback today by the speakers. And I'm feeling very positive that getting to the grassroots is the answer, giving the grassroots the opportunity to be the spokesperson to best identify what the needs are and how well those needs are addressed by the social policies presented, and if not, for those policies to be redesigned. And I will just say to the last statement on the paper that a fairer, more equitable, inclusive, and humane society as related to the 2030 agenda, I think is best reflected in policy that really comes from the grassroots, with our providing mechanisms for that word to get out, for it to be refined in a way that is understood from the top to the bottom. And I thank you for this opportunity to share a few words.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you for our participants for joining us today. Please join me in thanking our speakers for fantastic presentations, keeping our eyes on the prize for 2030. You may unmute and applaud so they can hear us. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm tempted to say we could go till 10:30 if there was a burning comment or question that you'd like to share with the speakers, but at 10:30 there'll be a sharp and firm turn off of the Zoom, okay? Cynthia, I know you wanted to say something. I saw your comments in the chat directed at Dr. Baker.
Well, yeah, I am just so excited as a fellow social worker here about the work that you all are doing. This was a fabulous webinar, and I really want us to collaborate because there's a critical opportunity for the human rights of older persons, which were excluded from the 1948 Universal Declaration on Human Rights. Age
Yes.
is not an issue. So we
Yes.
have an opportunity, this open-ended working group in May, that our voice be heard, that at least one of the options that is on the table be to look at and begin the option of drafting a new convention on the protection of human rights of older persons.
Wonderful. We still have our person connected to the UN. We have 2 people there who will promote your issue and your question. But also allow me to thank Dr. Zelenev for pulling us all together, for providing us an opportunity to share our thoughts and visions and ideas for moving forward. Thank you so much, Sergey. And thank you to our speakers, Dr. Peter N. Baker, Dr. Lynn Healy, Christopher Dapa, Dr. Suresh Parate, who am I missing out? Professor O'Mealy. Thank you so much. You know, you always get into trouble when you start thanking people and you leave somebody out. So I think I've covered everyone. But thank you so much. The recording will be available to those who've expressed an interest in getting the information. Thank you. Have a good day.
Can it maybe be posted, or a link to it be posted on the IC and IA websites?
Sure, we'll have Yunji help us with that, Dr. Baker. We'll do that. Thank you so much. Have a good rest of the evening, day, morning, wherever you are.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Bye-bye. Sergey, do you want to stay on behind?
Well, no, I just wanted to say that I'm most grateful to all participants for their
Yes.
wonderful statements and very enriching, very wise, I would say. There are plenty of things which we could discuss. Probably if we would have more time. You know, I think that the issues which Lynn brought with the citizens control probably deserve discussion for about 1 hour, and many issues which I heard from Chris and from Dr. Peter N. Baker and from Suresh. Suresh was also mentioning important issues of cultural relevance. I think those are really, really important. So all these issues are really giving us a very wide picture, and we all understand that social issues are complex. So this is reinforced our conviction that social issues are complex, and a thoughtful and comprehensive approach is required to address them. So in this sense, what we all learned, we're all learning from each other in this sense. And I think it was a wonderful seminar, and I'm most grateful to you, Coder, for skillfully navigating all the difficulties, substantive and technical. Thank you so much.
And thank you to Yunji as well. Yes.
I
Well,
want to say
Thank
hello
you.
to Rose.
Len was
Rose,
a fellow timekeeper with me. Len kept on sending messages. We over time.
I
But we
want to say
started a
hello
little
to
bit late.
Rose. I see your name on the list here. Good to see
Yeah.
another person from Jamaica, my second home.
Okay.
We have about 4 people from the Caribbean.
Yes, there was
Great.
somebody from Trinidad and Tobago on as
Yes.
well. Yes.
Marcia.
Very
And,
nice.
And we have
Sharon from Barbados.
Yes. Wonderful.
great. And I
Well,
saw
Thank you
people
so
from
much.
the NGO committee.
It was wonderful to hear. I mean, for many years, I was closely involved in the aging issues. I was the chief of the program, which works on aging, and I think that the comment which Peter N made are very appropriate. Of course, all the persons are now the conventional standard cliche, which is used in all UN documents. But in many other, let's say, forums, some other terms which she mentioned, like elderly, are still used, and I think that they are less appropriate. And in this sense, it's important to underscore this.
So I
To what
refer to
extent?
myself as an older person, not an
Yes.
elderly person.
But ILO is still using elderly, and the whole economic side, I mean, completely exclude the prospect that older people can either contribute to productivity and growth or anything else.
Yes, yes.
So that's a battle that needs to be won. I'm going to leave you all. Thank you all very much. Thank you very much, Lynn, especially.
Thanks, Peter.
Yes,
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Good to
Thank
see you all
All the
again.
best.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Nice to meet everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.